Daryl Morey speaking. What else stood out as far as the offseason getting underway and what he had to say as you project out?
I mean, it sounds like he said all the right things about maybe bringing Kelly back and likes Paul Reed and yada, yada, yada.
The Buddy comments were interesting.
He was pretty honest that, I basically, paraphrasing here, I don't have the quotes in front of me, but thought Buddy would be a better fit. That's on me, yada, yada, yada. Didn't play a whole lot with Joel, but even when he did play with Joel, it wasn't quite as seamless as we were expecting. And again, Buddy expressed interest during his end of season press conference of coming back. We'll see whether or not that was just lip service or not, or whether the Sixers would have any interest in that. Obviously at a much lower number. What was Buddy making, like 18 mil? Something like that?
18-ish, yeah.
Obviously not going to get that, and he will have a sizable cap hold, so if they want to do anything in free agency, they'll have to waive him and then bring him back with cap space or an exception. But yeah, nothing too notable outside of I like stars.
Anything for you? I mean, the Buddy Hield part.
I do think the Buddy part was interesting because he essentially said, without saying in these specific words, maybe he did. I have to go back and look at the quote, that they misevaluated Buddy and how he was going to fit in here. And maybe some of that is just protecting the relationship with Buddy and his representation and really just anyone else around the league, that Buddy clearly didn't play up to his potential here for most of his tenure. And Daryl wanted to find a way to talk about it without being like, well, he just wasn't good enough. And he gave him an out by saying, we thought, given what we had, we'd be able to get him more open shots. And that wasn't the case when Joel came back, and said that depending on what they do otherwise, that they still are leaving the door open. Like they're not opposed to him coming back. But certainly going from we got the best player at the deadline to, hey, we kind of screwed that one up.
He did say we still think we got one of the best players at the deadline.
And at the deadline, he said we had the best. That was the best trade.
Yes. So he didn't completely walk back everything he said. But I don't know. Maybe he thought a little bit of bloodletting was good for an audience that right now I don't think trusts him a whole lot, right? Am I I think the city right now is pretty apprehensive about this summer and his leadership and what have you, and I think he probably recognizes that. I just thought it was interesting because I when he got asked about it, I just figured we get same thing on the we need a wing comments. I just thought we'd get like a generic, yeah, Buddy had his ups and downs, but he's a good player. We still
You saw what he did in game 6.
He like made a difference in game 6, and that's the sort of thing we brought him here to do. And instead was like,
didn't work.
So I thought that was noteworthy at the very least.
Yeah, that one was noteworthy. I also thought the other part that was noteworthy were the cohesion comments, where he was speaking about just the team having familiarity next year coming back. He talked about Joel, Tyrese Maxey. He mentioned Paul Reed and Ricky Counselor IV. Other than that, he kept stressing how this team is going to look completely different from what we just finished seeing last week. So that was noteworthy to me. And we knew that because of the contracts that we already know. But it was interesting to hear him say Paul Reed is going to be back. All right, the questions up and down about his contract. It's a team option, right, for the second year, since it didn't automatically kick in.
It's just non-guaranteed.
It's just non-guaranteed. So
I'm sure there's a date where it becomes guaranteed. Probably I think it's January, halfway through the season, every contract becomes guaranteed.
Right.
But yeah.
Okay. So, and he mentioned Ricky Counselor IV. So that one was there. And I just thought that was something that was, you want to make sure that there's not a lot of turnover every year.
Well, yeah, but you can't keep good players around just because you know them. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. You can't keep bad players around, players who aren't good enough around just because you know them.
No.
So there's going to be turnover when you're not good enough. He did say, pretty much like, oh yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of roster turnover. We can't avoid that. They actually could. Like, the only reason you have to renounce all these guys is if you are going to use that cap space. Otherwise, you could bring most of the roster back. But that was another signal of like, yeah, no, I'm going big game hunting in the summer. But he was pretty open. Like, yeah, we're not going to have continuity next year. We just have to make best with it.
Yeah, and he pointed out some examples of teams that he thought were not continuity teams that won. I guess he used the Lakers as an example. I do think it's a little bit of stretching the truth, right? Like they they haven't kept, or they didn't keep, the important role players that they should have when they won a title in 2020. The two foundational guys are the continuity. And I think once you win and you start getting into those conference finals type situations, the continuity is not, hey, we bring back the same roster every single year. It's, you have your building blocks. You more than likely have your coach and your general manager, and everything else is just an exercise in how well do we nail the draft? How well do we nail free agency? Do we make the best use of whether it's the mid-level or whatever exceptions that you have? It's using the tools at your disposal to supply the few guys that you need and absorb any kind of new talent, whether that's young guys, older veterans, ring chasing, whatever it might be. I think Denver is actually going to run into this probably after this season. They have a decision to make on Kentavious Caldwell-Pope that I think is very important. They're going to have the main dudes in place, but who else stays beyond that? It's why they spent a lot of this season trying to develop those young wings that they've drafted, because let's say KCP leaves this summer, they're going to need somebody like Strother to step up and play a much bigger role. So they're not going to have continuity this season. We can all agree on that. It doesn't mean that they can't win this year. It might be more challenging than a team that has had, years and years of like a 6 or 7 man group that has been able to grow together. But yeah, it should be a long-term goal. I don't think it's a realistic short-term thing.
And as much as they played without certain players on their roster for a good portion of the season, there was a lot of turnover in that starting 5 and in the top 10 in terms of the rotation, where the continuity just wasn't there in general. So if they're able to have a training camp with the new people coming in, including someone like Buddy Hield, let's say Buddy Hield does come back, he's had a half a season, and then we would have a full training camp with the team going into the start of the season. It may look a little bit different going into next year. So with that continuity will help. Same thing with Kelly Oubre. If he were to come back, he's got a full season under his belt playing with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, calling Nick Nurse a rock star of a coach. Something like that will be fine. And by the time you get to the nuts and bolts of the season, when it's time for them to really ramp up for the postseason, you hope that cohesion is already there and it's already in place for that stretch run.
We all silly like the mayor.